Blair Huddy, tell me about the flamingo and the giraffe.
So I can see you have been on my LinkedIn page. Okay. So last year I got this sort of mystery illness that it took me months to sort of figure out what was happening. And I got very, very ill very, very quickly, more so than I've ever been in my entire life. My central nervous system shut down, my autonomic nervous system shut down. I stopped sleeping, I stopped eating. I was having just panic and terror unlike anything I'd ever known. And I have always kind of had this, I call it two-way communication relationship with the universe. I learned it from, have you heard of Gabby Bernstein or Bernstein?
Sounds familiar, but I don't think I know it well.
Okay, she wrote the book Super Attractor. And she was on a podcast that I was listening to many years ago. I think this was in like 2019. And she was saying that she was struggling to get pregnant, and she manifested a baby using lilies. So she started buying herself lilies and talking about lilies and just like surrounding herself with all things lilies. And then the following year on her birthday, someone sent her lilies. And that day she found out that she was pregnant. And I was listening to that podcast and am I allowed to curse on this?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Don't worry
And
about
I was
that.
like, well, if this bitch can do it, then like I can definitely do it too. Not calling her bitch, but like bish, like bish. And
Yeah.
so I was like, if she could do it, I could do it. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm like desperately single and I have this ache in my heart to meet the love of my life. And so I'm going to meet the love of my life using the color red. And it was totally random. I just picked like the most random thing. I didn't want it to be a thing. So I was like, okay, it's just going to be a color. And I started wearing, like, I bought this like really obnoxious red jacket. And like, I don't even look good in red. I started painting my nails red. I started wearing red lipstick. Like, it looked terrible on me. I started talking to people about the color red and like what I was doing. And I started noticing red cars. And that was in December of 2019. And in June of 2020, I met my now husband and he drove a red car. And that was the first time that I was like, all right, this is a two-way street here. So fast forward to 2025, sick doesn't even begin to describe it truly. And I asked, whatever you believe in, God, the universe. For me, it is just, the universe out there. I asked for a sign that I was going to recover and that I would make it through this and that this would eventually go away. And I wanted it to be something very unassuming, something that is not like something that you see all the time. And so I chose a flamingo. And can we get like super frank on this? Like, is it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. And so for a good 2 months, I would say like June into July, I didn't see any flamingos into August. And I had reached a point where I was so ill and so hopeless. And I mean, it was really severe, that I made an attempt on my life. And the next day it failed. So I was too short. I tried to hang myself in the closet and I was too short. My feet hit the floor. And the next day I started seeing flamingos everywhere. And I'm not talking like random, like one or two. I'm talking, I started seeing them everywhere. And, I'd be watching TV and there would be someone in the background on a flamingo floaty. And it was like, I just happened to be watching like this TV episode at this time. We would go to the store and there would be like a flamingo thing there. There was a flamingo frame at the store. I went for a walk one day and, I had planned on doing this like full kind of loop, and something in my gut just went like, don't do a full loop, turn around now and go back the way you came. And sure enough, when I turned around, someone in their front yard had 2 flamingos in their front yard. In October, I've never seen these decorations before, but this year or that year or last year became popular something called flamingos. So people would put like skeleton flamingos in their front
I've seen
yard.
those.
I started seeing just like everywhere. And so I was like, okay, I get it. I get the flamingos. But what I asked for was pretty open-ended, which was just a sign that this would be over, not a sign that this would be over when. So I said, okay, I'm getting the flamingos. If this is going to be over by March or sooner, please also show me giraffes. And right away, like that day, I was like, I know there are giraffes around. I had this sense. I was like, I'm just not seeing them. And then later that night, my husband pointed out we have 2 giraffes that we each painted sitting on, like, we have this like table underneath our TV, and it's a big thing. And I almost never look down there because it's kind of below my eyesight. And we have 2 giraffes facing each other. And then I totally, like, we had it covered all with coats, but like on our coat rack, because he's from Africa, our coat rack is like a lion, a hippo, the middle one is a giraffe. And like, I would literally, like, I had just been missing it. I had to go get like the mail key, and I literally pulled the mail key off the giraffe and like didn't clock that it was a giraffe. He had a giraffe statue in his office, which I've since moved outside of mine. And then I started seeing flamingos and giraffes together in really weird ways. Lego released a brand new set of a flamingo and a giraffe together. It just blew my mind. We went to the grocery store, and we were in the cereal aisle because my husband loves cereal. And you know how sometimes in the grocery aisle there'll be like a separate display that kind of hangs off the edge?
Yeah.
There were baby bibs, and it was a set, and one was a flamingo and one was a giraffe. And it was those kinds of things where I was like, holy cow, like this is unreal. And so as I have started to heal more and more, the flamingos and giraffes have slowed down, and I've sort of realized, you know, I'm very close to recovery, full recovery, and I know I will make a full recovery. And I've sort of realized that like the flamingo and giraffe are within. So I had reached a stage where I was sort of really, really desperate. And I was thinking about the effects of psilocybin on healing and like healing the brain and sort of changing neural pathways and things like that. But I was really scared to try it. And that day, in like that moment, while I was thinking about whether or not I wanted to try this psilocybin, I got an inbound request on LinkedIn from a total stranger. I'd never met this person before in my entire life. And she had a flamingo emoji in her name. And it was like, okay, green light. And sure enough, so I had, from this illness, I had developed very severe tinnitus. And from the psilocybin that day, I had silence for the first time in 9 months. And so I've since used the flamingos and giraffes to sort of guide me, but I've also put them in my profile and asked people to ask me about them so that people can understand, one, you know, when you talk about leadership, like if you're looking for guidance from something external, like eventually you'll come to the place where you realize it's within you, and it's always been within you. Like I've always been the flamingo. And second, that I don't even know how to say this. You don't need to look outside of yourself if you're wondering whether or not you're making the right decision or you have the right answer, or you know, whatever it is. You are the thing. You've always had the answer. So that's where the flamingo and giraffe came from.
Very cool. That's an amazing story. I appreciate you sharing, and thanks for being so open, Blair. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I hope that's okay with your audience. If they're not like, good, this girl's crazy.
That's beautiful. So that's really quite impactful. Blair, who are you and what drives you?
Who am I? So my name is Blair Huddy. I am the principal founder of the company called Hudson Communications. We are a PR agency for projects and companies that help people on the planet. And that's what drives me. So being mission-based and sort of using my powers for good, because I've been in the PR and marketing and comms world for over 10 years and almost 15, going on 15 years. I sort of hit this point where I realized I could use my gifts for good and decided that that's what I wanted to do. And so that's what drives me is, being able to get up in the morning and know that I'm going to get on a call with someone who is working on something that's doing good or, just I'm driven by the ability to help other people, whether that's directly myself by telling the story of what happened to me. So NBC News just covered my story, and so that I hopefully prevent anybody else from consuming what I consumed, thinking that it was safe, so that nothing like that ever happens to anybody else. But also the desire to help people through my work is sort of what drives me, what keeps me going.
Very nice. Yeah. So staying on the topic of more of your business, Flywheel Leadership is about discovering and practicing the leadership systems that bring out the best in each of us and our teams. Part of this is really understanding what it takes to lead teams and clients. How do you partner with leaders to help them achieve their outcomes?
Are you talking about client leaders or like the leaders that I work with individually?
Either one, whatever you want to touch on, whatever comes to mind.
So when it comes to the leaders that I work with individually within the business, my philosophy has always been something that I just kind of learned from what I didn't like. I had a boss who was such a micromanager that I couldn't get anything done. And then alternatively, I had like a dual reporting relationship with two bosses who not only did they let me do my thing and they just went, you own this, go do your thing. But when I failed, they let me fail. And then they asked me what happened and they asked me what I was going to do about it. And I went, I love that. And so that's kind of how I developed I obviously kind of put my individual spin on it. But when I'm working with people and we're working on projects together, I like to empower people to do what they need to do. I'm not going to clock watch you. I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm going to trust you and make sure, first of all, I want to hire people that are smarter than me. And a second, when I do that, when I hire people that are smarter than me, I want to let them you do you. And I want you to come back to me once a week or however often we decide it is with here's what I'm doing. Here's what's the pipeline. Here's what it looks like. Here's the status on this, and here's where we're going from there. Great. Okay. I'll see you next week. Go do that then. That's sort of how it's been for me. And when I work with other leaders, going back to that though, I also did adopt what I really liked of, I have had people work for me who fail and I let them fail and then I let them fix it. And then they know, my philosophy is then just don't do it again. Do it once, you fail, you learn. Just don't do it again. And it would be ridiculous of me to say that nobody fails. I got where I'm at because I failed forward. And so I try to help the people that work with me fail forward too when they do. When it comes to how I work with clients and sort of how I lead them, it's a lot of guidance. It's a lot of helping them set expectations. It's a lot of helping them understand what the expected outcome is and why they can expect that outcome versus what they might expect to be the outcome And in PR, those things can vary very drastically. So, somebody can expect that, month one, we're going to come in and get, front page of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and there's going to be headlines everywhere. And I have to come in and go, hey, that's not how this works. And so, it's a lot of guidance and a lot of, even consulting folks on, while we are a PR agency. I've had a client where I just went to him and I said, I think you need an internal CMO. Like, I think you're at that stage. We will still be your PR agency, and I will always give you my honest opinion on all kinds of marketing stuff, because I've been all over the marketing department from bottom to top. So it really does come from a place of, based on what I've experienced in my career, sharing with them and then helping them understand. And I do a lot of, also, I tend to, I don't know why I attract folks who are a bit more senior, I would say. And so I do a lot of also helping them understand newer technologies and how they work and why they might need to care. And so, like, the latest thing with Geo and AO, we're doing a lot of like, hey, this is what it is. This is why your company needs to care about it. This is what we're going to do about it. And so just a lot of like, really, we are communicators both internally and externally. So we go and we communicate on behalf of the companies, but really also helping them understand things and communicating tightly within.
Very nice. What, you mentioned a couple of things that I think are really important to pull out there. Letting people fail. That was one thing that was told to me early on in my career, was there isn't anything that you can do wrong or that you're going to mess up that I can't fix as a leader. Right now, depends on the business and the context there, of course, but broadly speaking, when you think about it, everything can be fixed. Right.
Yeah.
And letting people go out there and do it and learn from their failure. It's said so just commonly, and you read about it, but to actually do it takes a lot of courage from the leader to actually let people fail and not be there to just catch them before they fail every single time and try to almost prevent the failure. In a lot of ways, you're preventing the learning, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then being the boss who always needed and or wanted. It's such a simple concept, but so important. So I appreciate you calling that out. Like, a lot of people ask, like, how have you learned about leadership? Like, what did you do and all that? A lot of that goes back to the experiences you've had.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I just, sat in a classroom and learned about leadership, right? It's about those experiences. And then to your point on, working with your clients on playing out the game on what's going to happen. I see it time and time again working with other leaders on, okay, this is what I can step through. Can I guarantee this is exactly what's going to happen? No.
Yeah.
But I can put 90% of my money on this is the path forward. And if that doesn't happen, what we're preparing for is still going to help you be ready for whatever does happen. It's amazing how that experience and that context really plays out, and being able to articulate that with clients is so powerful. So thanks for calling those out, Blair.
Yeah, I do also read a lot of leadership books, like right now. So I started a business book and tea of the month club. And so we're on our second book. Last month we read Unreasonable Hospitality, which like really goes into a different style of leadership than I think even I think it was a little bit much for me. But this month we're reading Thinking in Bets. And it's a real interesting understanding of how leaders make decisions and like the multitude of decisions that you must make every day. And that a lot of times you're making a bet, and you're making your bet with the information that you have at the time. And
that's right.
There are things that could happen that are totally outside of your skill and totally outside of your control. And so you also have to then have acceptance for like the decisions that you make. And that goes back to, when I got sick, I made a decision to consume something that wound up making me really, really ill for a very, very long period of time. But I made a bet on it because it was marketed to me as something that was healthy and safe. And so I took all the information that I had at the time and I made a bet, and it had a bad outcome, but it doesn't mean I made a bad decision. I made a decision that I thought was right for me. I can look back on it now and go, maybe I wish I hadn't made that decision. But then you also have to come to a part of acceptance. And I'll admit, I go through like acceptance, and then I go back to grief, and I go back to bargaining, and it goes back and forth. But you get to a stage where you go, okay, I accept that I made that decision, and now the only way to do this is to go through. I can't go back. I have to go through. And so every day, what is my next best step? And that's all you can do.
Love that. So let's talk about it. The impacts of vitamin B6 toxicity, the research about that, B6 toxicity and electrolyte powders has really stood out as something you shared and you've talked quite a bit about. You mentioned the article as well, or the piece. It caught my attention when I saw your post on LinkedIn. I've enjoyed some, I would call them moderate sports and hydration drinks, right? No like huge energy drinks or anything like that, but that's what you think, right? You think they're moderate, right? Occasionally, not crazy about them, but again, you think that you're moderate, but are you really? And then more importantly, I have a teenage son in athletics, right? That consumes a wider variety of these types of things. So I was really concerned when I saw your note. Can you walk us through, as it relates to your experience, but also what you've learned and, what those impacts are or potential impacts depending on the situation, and where do you find these products, what they are, and, anything you're comfortable sharing there?
Yeah. So it really started when my husband and I moved from California to Colorado. When we got here to Colorado, and I'm surprised that like people didn't talk more about this in California, because I was born and raised there. It gets really, really hot. And so nobody was talking about like stay hydrated or drink electrolytes to stay hydrated in California. But when we got to Colorado, everybody we encountered, like for a while, we still had our old California license plate, and like people would even pull us aside and be like, "You're from California, you need to hydrate. Like you live at elevation now, you need to hydrate. Make sure you stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Don't forget to stay hydrated."
That's so true. I've been to Colorado many times, so I can relate to that. Like just it's like a public service announcement when you get there, isn't it?
Yeah.
But go ahead.
The governor, like it was really hot that summer, and the governor posted like, "Make sure you stay hydrated." So December of that year, we walk into a Costco. This is end of 2024, and there's something on the shelf called Liquid IV, and on the front of it says liquid hydration. And I'm like, oh, perfect. Like everybody keeps telling me that I need to stay hydrated. This is, I'll consume this. I'll add it to my water, and it'll make sure that I'm more hydrated than just water. I did not understand what electrolytes were. So I didn't understand that they are synthetic forms of potassium, magnesium, a lot of times salt, table salt. I didn't understand how electrolytes affect your body. So we are energetic beings. We like to think of ourselves as, human and invincible and all those kind of things, but we are made of energy. And so when you mess with the function of that energy, or the level of energy, or the input of energy, and things that mess with that, you can have an adverse outcome. I also did not know, I was very unaware that they added synthetic vitamins to the packets. Now, we just moved to Colorado. My husband and I are big fans of going on very long walks. And so we were very active. We like every weekend it was like on that All Trails app, like what new hike can we do? And so I didn't think that it would be dangerous in any sort of way. And like, even back in California, like I would go on really long walks and consume like 2 Celsius, like, just not a care in the world, not a worry in the world of what I was putting in my body. And I started immediately to notice some dizziness, and that progressed. And symptoms came on and they got worse and worse. Heart palpitations, just, everything under the sun that you could possibly imagine. I stopped sleeping. And then my father came out to visit in March of 2025. And I didn't know that at this point I was already toxic with B6. So Liquid IV contains over 100% of the recommended daily value of B6 in a single packet. So you're already consuming everything that you need in a day. It is very important to note that B6 is the only vitamin that is not water soluble. So people will tell you that B6 is water soluble and you'll just pee it out. That is not true. Particularly synthetic B6 is a known neurotoxin. And so I had no idea that the electrolytes have been causing my symptoms to this stage. But I also did not know that I was B6 toxic. And so I was already overloaded with the vitamin. It was already overriding what natural B6 from foods does in your body, and it's essential to all of your nerve function, all of your receptor function in your brain. Basically, your central and autonomic function all run on B6. So when it stops working, you stop working, and it is very scary and very serious. We went to a restaurant because one of our great joys is finding restaurants and going and having a great meal. And I wound up trying chicken liver for the first time, not knowing that I was B6 toxic and not knowing that chicken liver and liver in particular is quite high and concentrated in B6. And so I immediately had a reaction. I started sweating. I started feeling like I was going to vomit. I just like a whole host of other things. And I started to think that I was having an allergic reaction. So my husband took me to the hospital. They, said she's having an allergic reaction. They were like, well, the treatment for allergic reaction is epi. And I was like, listen, I've been having heart palpitations and like bad heart palpitations. I think the last thing that I need right now is adrenaline. And they were like, this is the treatment. You're getting it. And so they gave me the epi, and I immediately went into VTAC for 18 beats. So for those who aren't aware, VTAC is ventricular tachycardia. So my heart rate spiked really, really high, far too high for 18 beats. Such that, like, I don't know if you've ever been in the ER, but like normally, you just have that like beep, beep, beep sound and stuff started going off in my room. And I, got a lot of people real friendly, real fast. And so they slap the defibrillator pads on me, and they say, if we need to use these, we're going to. And kept me overnight in the cardiac unit and discharged me the next day. The cardiologist on staff had no explanation, and I had no indication that it was the electrolytes that was causing this. So I had no reason to say, like, I'm also consuming electrolytes every day. When I got home, I developed head to toe neuropathy that continued, and I continued to drink them because I just had no idea. I didn't know what neuropathy was. So for me, it was head to toe tingling. And then as it progressed, it got extremely painful. Such that I couldn't touch my own face. I couldn't in the shower wash myself with a washcloth. It would send my nerves into complete overdrive. Like I said, I stopped sleeping. I stopped being able to eat or hold anything down. So I was vomiting quite a bit every day. And I started having visual and auditory hallucinations. It was bad. It was really, really bad. And I kept going to the doctor and saying, something's wrong. Something's really, really wrong. You need to take a look at this. And they kept dismissing me. In fact, at one stage, the doctor was like, we think you might be having like a bipolar manic episode, because my mother is diagnosed as bipolar. And I went back after that and I went, this is not a manic episode. I've never been diagnosed as bipolar. I've never had an incidence of mania. Something happened. I need you to test everything. Test everything. Test all my vitamins. Test my iron. Test my ferritin. Test something is wrong. Test everything. And I have the medical records. She even noted in her medical records, I'm reluctantly testing her vitamin levels, but this is very unlikely to be caused by a vitamin deficiency or excessive vitamin intake. That was May 31st. I had bloods drawn May 31st, 2025. That night, my husband, who had also been consuming the liquid IV, had a heart attack. And he was discharged June 1st. June 2nd, I got a call from a nurse at the doctor's office, and they said, your B6 levels came back extremely high. Whatever you're taking that has B6 in it, you need to stop. And that was it. That was all the guidance that I got. I didn't get the guidance of, just so you know, when you stop consuming this thing, you're going to go into withdrawals. And so it's actually not going to get better. It's going to get worse before it gets better. They didn't tell me that B6, in particular synthetic B6, has a half-life of 30 days. And so when you stop taking it, only every 30 days does, half of the remaining amount of toxin. And so they didn't say you're going to still be toxic for 6 months. I got no guidance whatsoever. I got no, this is going to disrupt your GABA glutamate balance. And so, you might want to consider going on something that will help boost your GABA receptors and dampen glutamate. I had to do all of that on my own, and I wasn't sleeping, so I had all the time in the world. They never said that this is going to really disrupt your receptors, and so you're not going to be yourself for a very long time. And everybody has a little anxiety. This was panic, sheer panic, unlike anything I've ever experienced before in my life. And it lasted for months and months and months, for 6 full months, until what I call my receptor day, which was November 17th. And that was when the toxin fully cleared my body. And since then, healing is not linear, but it has been improving. So I'm improving for sure. And I am confident now that at some point this year, I will make a full recovery and be back to myself.
Blair, that's got to be hard to even talk about. Thank you for sharing. And I'm so happy to hear that you're on the path to a full recovery from what you know at this point. I guess, making this real for other people, first of all, that are learning about the potentials with this. Can you share, first of all, from what you looked into, what other products have similar concerns from your knowledge?
Yeah, a lot of them. And actually, so the post that you're referencing, the one that concerned you, stemmed from me seeing 10 influencers promoting electrolytes in a row without any sort of hey, these are not meant to be consumed daily. There are concerns about cumulative dosage. These are products that are put on shelves that are left for the consumer to self-dose, and there's no mention of cumulative exposure risk. It is in most electrolytes. So I think the only one that I've seen that doesn't have it in them is Element. But Element has its own problems, and people are going into kidney failure from consuming Element. So I'm very wary of electrolytes in general. It's also in cereals, fortified cereals and fortified milks. So Cheerios checks almost every cereal in the cereal aisle has synthetic B6 in it. Any sort of energy drinks, Celsius has B6 in it, Herbalife has B6 in it, Andrew Huberman's new product AG1 has B6 in it. In the post that you reference, and perhaps we can put this in the show notes or however you want to do that.
Sure.
I actually put a comment of, and I tagged a whole bunch of brands that include synthetic B6 in our products. And interestingly, not a single brand reached out. And I find that to be very interesting. I also discovered that there's a B6 lobby that lobbies for synthetic B6 to be included in products. It is also in some shampoos, so it can be absorbed through your skin. What you don't need to worry about is naturally occurring B6. I say that with a caveat with, I had to be concerned with those foods while I was toxic, because obviously I was already really overloaded. So potatoes made me quite ill. Chicken made me quite ill. I couldn't have sweet potatoes, couldn't have bananas, couldn't have avocados. Once you're sort of past the stage where you're no longer toxic, naturally occurring B6, whether it is in liver or chicken or beef or fish or bananas or avocados or sweet potatoes or regular potatoes, is safe, right? And a necessary part of our diet and our nerve function and our nervous system function. You just want to, I am now hyper aware of anything that's synthetic. So like when it comes to electrolytes, whether or not those powders contain B6, because some of them don't, like Buoy has some that contain B6 and then some that don't. What you're consuming is synthetic. It's synthetic magnesium. It's synthetic potassium. It's synthetic calcium. It's table salts, or, you know, not naturally occurring salts. So if you're concerned about hydration and you want electrolytes, something like coconut water has naturally occurring magnesium, naturally occurring potassium, naturally occurring calcium, and is much less of a risk. So I'm just very hesitant of anything that's synthetic. It's actually like my husband, who was an avid drinker of like a almond milk kind of a thing. They fortify almond milk with synthetic B12. And so he's, from learning from my experience, he now makes his own almond milk. And it's actually, he does it every morning, and it's become a ritual, and he really loves it. So just to, you know, really be concerned about products that are putting synthetic things in them. Because too much of anything, even water, right? Water is really good for us. But if you drink too much water, you'll drown. So, you know, too much of anything is just not a good idea. So,
well, thank you for sharing a little bit more there. So, Blair, what is your goal at this point? You know, I certainly see you educating the public and sharing your experience and the trauma, all the things you've gone through, and making sure others are considering, you know, their own livelihood and options and things of that nature. How do you plan to proceed with, you know, bringing this to light, the dangers, and just making sure your story continues to be heard where it needs to be?
Yeah. So the nature of my work is in PR. And so I sort of said, well, if I'm in PR, I can talk to reporters about this. And so that was sort of the first step, is saying, if there is a reporter that would cover this story, if there's a reporter that covers this beat. And so I've spoken to dozens. And like you, have been invited on podcasts to talk about it, just to talk about it as much as I possibly can. I saw last night, Kathy Griffin liked the story from NBC. So NBC did a story on B6 and included me in it. And that came about, her, I guess, editor or producer sent her my post. So the first stage is to sort of continue to talk about it. The second is to teach people that other countries don't do this. So synthetic B6 is banned, fully banned in the Netherlands, and has had severe restrictions put on it in Australia that will go into effect in 2027, that like it will require a prescription. And so other countries recognize that this vitamin can be very dangerous. So the first stage is sort of talking about it and telling people what I know and what I've learned. And I think the second stage will be hopefully helping some similar legislation come to the United States, and similar restrictions, or maybe these products need a warning label. So that's sort of the next step, I guess. And then honestly, truly, deeply, I would like to move on with my life.
Yeah.
I don't want to be carrying this B6 story for very long, because it's not a good
Yeah.
one and it doesn't feel good. And I would like to go back to being the very happy, bubbly, relentlessly optimistic person that I was before this. And so while I do feel like now is the time for me to talk about it, because it's recent, because there's attention, because I had a post that went viral, and now this article on NBC, now is my time to talk about it, but that time will come to an end. And when it does, I would like to close this chapter, and continue to do the work that I love to do, and have a very long and happy life traveling the world with my husband.
Completely understandable. I wish you the best of luck with continuing on that
Thank you.
healing journey and making sure you get back to where you want to be with that and can put this behind you. So really appreciate you sharing that with us. If people have doubts about amounts or anything like that, I do think it's important to ask that question on like how much are we talking about consuming, right? Like some people are like, oh, she probably took like gallons of this stuff or whatever. Like how much did you consume and what types of periods of time?
Yeah.
Just to share your own experience. I know it could vary for individuals.
It definitely varies for individuals. I consumed 1 per day every day for 4 months. And then there was about, I stopped for about a month. And then there was about like 5 days where I was so violently ill and vomiting so profusely that, because I was already semi in withdrawals, that I consumed again, thinking I've had electrolyte loss, fluid loss, this will probably be good for me. And so it was a period of 4 months and then like a week. So, but it was every day. And so that's where the real risk comes in. Having one is not going to make you toxic.
Right.
Having one every day for 4 months puts you at risk for cumulative exposure.
Makes sense. Anything that we've missed that we should talk about today, Blair?
Not that I can think of. I think for me, this type of leadership in informing the public, there's the leadership that I work on in my business and that I've encountered in my day-to-day working life. But this type of leadership is something that's new to me in, leading other people when it comes to personal experience and their health. And so it's been an interesting journey to be on.
I bet. How can listeners best find you or follow you in your mission, Blair?
I'm most active on LinkedIn. So you can find me Blair Huddy on LinkedIn. And then I think on all the other ones, I'm at Real Blair Huddy. And if you'd like more information about our PR services, it is on my LinkedIn page. But it's also HudsonDavisCommunications.com. And my email is Blair@HudsonDavisCommunications.com, even if you just want to say hi.
Blair Huddy, we appreciate you sharing today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Take care.
Take care.